Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be looking at the 2022 midterm elections. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the United States Senate and basically trying to make premature predictions on which way these races are going to go. So far, I have, on my model anyway, 11 toss-up races in the 2022 midterms, followed by 46 safe Democratic seats and 43 safe Republican seats. These are seats effectively that either party's candidate will win by a comfortable margin of around 12 points or more. So we're going to start off with the West Coast and move to the East with the first state of Nevada. So Nevada's Senate election will probably consist of incumbent Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, although she hasn't decided to run yet as of February 2021. But ratings for this seat are kind of all over the place. Some people on the heavily Democratic side have it as likely Democratic, and some people have it as right-wing as battleground. If we look at the 2020 election, Nevada didn't have a Senate election last year, but in the presidential election, the state of Nevada actually voted to the right of where it voted in 2016 by around 0.02% or something like that. It's a very close swing. But nonetheless, the state as a whole did actually trend more Republican. If we look at the shift from 2016, the areas that shifted red: Clark County, the most populous center in Nevada, as well as most of the northern rural areas. Carlson City and Washoe County, which are the second and third most populous areas of the state, did trend a bit more Democrat, but the main population center actually trended more Republican, which was very surprising. Now, out of all the states that Biden ended up winning, or let me just say this, out of all the states that Clinton won narrowly in 2016, Maine, Minnesota, Colorado, Virginia to a lesser extent, and New Hampshire, all of the states in 2020, Biden improved on his margins, in some cases massively. In Maine, he won the state by around 9 points. Hillary only won it by around 2.5, 3 maybe. New Hampshire was the state Hillary Clinton only won by 0.2%. Joe Biden ended up winning the state by 7. Nevada is the only one of these Clinton states in 2016 to actually get redder, which tells me that there's a broader trend kind of back towards the center, towards the right a bit. Ever since 2008, Nevada has been getting redder on the presidential level ever since it went to Barack Obama in 2008 by around 10 points. So it wouldn't shock me if this Senate race was to be very close, and I think it will be. Finally, we're going to look at the last time Catherine Cortez Masto was up for election, and that was in 2016 when she was a newcomer to the Senate. She ended up beating Joe Heck by around 2.5 points or so, and her opponent actually won Washoe County by almost a point, but it wasn't enough for him to end up winning the state. Given the Republican environment that is going to happen in 2022, even if it is more slightly than 2014 or 2010, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I actually think as of right now, depending on who the Republican challenger is for Catherine Cortez Masto, I'd actually say that the state of Nevada is actually a tilt red state. Now, that might seem pretty bizarre, but let me preface this by saying that this has been a state that has moved consistently more to the right. Catherine Cortez Masto's approval rating isn't really that great. She's a mediocre senator, not really well known in the state. And 2022 is going to have more of a Republican push to take back the Senate. And I think in a state like Nevada, which might be overlooked by Democrats trying to hold on to, say, Arizona, Georgia, maybe flip North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, I think Nevada might be one of those states that's a bit overlooked, so I think it actually might end up favoring the GOP this time around. But again, take it with a grain of salt. It's only February of 2021. There's plenty of time until the election. Next, we're going to look at the state of Arizona. In this election, Mark Kelly is going to be up for re-election. He was just elected to the Senate last year by around 2.4 percentage points. So not a very large margin, but a comfortable enough margin for the state. He did really well in places like Maricopa County, winning it by around 3 points. Pima County winning it by nearly 20. So these are the population centers of Arizona. This isn't surprising. if we look at the presidential election, Mark Kelly overperformed Joe Biden by around 2 points or so, almost 2 points. And, of course, Martha McSally underperformed Trump by around 0.2%. So it really was Mark Kelly overperforming that led to his resounding victory, not so much his opponent underperforming. If we look at where Joe Biden did well again, Maricopa County. This is basically the county that decides the elections in Arizona. I think it's 65% of the state's total population. So whoever wins Maricopa County is effectively going to win in the state of Arizona. And, of course, Pima County. These are the two population centers. Now, of course, the last time this seat was up for election was when John McCain was still alive, and he won the seat very comfortably against Ann Kirkpatrick. He won it by around 13 points. To put some perspective on that, Trump only won the state by 3.6 in the same election. So I think it's more so that Arizona views Trump Republicans and Trump himself very unfavorably, but is still kind of warm in a sense to Republicans. They elected Doug Ducey again as governor in 2018 by around 16 points. All the other statewide offices went Republican in Arizona, I think, except the Secretary of State and the Senate. So this is a state that I still think is a purple state, but gives a slight edge to Republicans. That being said, however, the Arizona Republican Party is a very right-wing party, more so than in other states, in other purple states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. In Arizona, for instance, you have the likes of Kelly Ward, let's say, who is a very Trumpian Republican. If you get a nominee like a Kelly Ward or a Trump Republican, the seat is definitely going to stay in Mark Kelly's column. But I would say right now Mark Kelly is a very inoffensive senator, especially by Arizona senators. They seem to like their centrist Democrat, centrist Republican type politicians. So I actually think Mark Kelly has a slight edge in the state of Arizona right now, given those things. Now, unless he passes some legislation that fires up the Republican base any more so, I think he might be able to eke out a victory in Arizona, even given that it's a red wave year, because I don't think he's a very offensive senator. It's very hard to dislike him from a partisan perspective, I think. So I think he'll probably hold on there, at least right now, based on what we know. The state of Alaska is not really a toss-up. I think the Republican nominee will probably win the seat very comfortably. I think it's a safe margin if Lisa Murkowski ends up winning the seat, and probably a likely margin if it's just a typical Republican, although it could very well be safe in both cases. I'm just going to say safe right now. If we look at the 2020 Senate race in Alaska, Dan Sullivan beat Al Gross by around 13 points. So just over the criteria for a safe margin, but this is borderline a high likely margin here in the state of Alaska. He did really well in places Trump really didn't. This North Slope kind of area, which tends to go for Democrats. Let's see if they have it on the presidential too. Yeah, the North Slope, which tends to favor Democrats here. So Dan Sullivan has some more bipartisan appeal to an extent, but also Alaska is a state that has a huge third-party presence. Lisa Murkowski did vote to convict Trump on impeachment, which I think still will have somewhat of an impact and reverberate into 2022. I think she's going to have a very tough primary in the state of Alaska. I know she is a Murkowski from Alaska, and the history of that family runs very deep. In fact, I think her father has been in politics in the state since the 1960s, and she's been in the Senate since 2004. So the Murkowskis are a very popular family in the state of Alaska, but I don't think they're unbeatable. And as we saw in Massachusetts, the Kennedy dynasty was taken down back in the primary season of 2020. So I really think it's likely that Lisa Murkowski faces a formidable challenger, and she might actually lose the Republican primary, but I still wouldn't count out a scenario like in 2010 where she decides to run as a write-in candidate, and that could be a really interesting situation. So Alaska, in this sense, is really hard to gauge. Of course, if we look presidentially speaking, Alaska only went to President Trump by 10 points, only by a likely margin. So this is a state presidentially that has gotten closer, whether that's due to, Trump's handling of COVID, Trump in general, or just the appeal of Biden. I'm not really sure. The state was somewhat close in 2012, and by somewhat I mean kind of bordering around safe and likely in terms of Romney and Obama. But I'm just going to say for right now that Alaska is probably going to just be likely Republican. That rating is probably going to change when we find out who the nominee is, whether it's Murkowski. I think if Murkowski is the nominee, there'll probably be a significant third-party libertarian that probably eats up some of the vote. So that could make the race possibly closer. But for right now, I'm just going to put it as likely Republican, considering I don't know what the situation is going to be like in Alaska. Moving on to the state of Iowa, if we go back to 2016, Chuck Grassley... Oh, this is the wrong year. This is the wrong year, too. Chuck Grassley won his Senate seat in Iowa by a convincing margin of 25 points. So he's a candidate that has broad appeal across Iowa. He's been around for at least a century in the state, maybe more. He's running countless elections and won most of them pretty handily like this. Even winning places like Polk County, urban centers, Sioux City. I don't really know if that's a blue county generally. I don't think it is. But he has broad appeal across the state as a whole. Now, it's actually kind of crazy because Chuck Grassley is getting up there in age, and he actually hasn't counted out running in the Iowa Senate race. He's still considering whether to run. It would be his 8th term if he actually did run. But for right now, a lot of people say this seat is safe Republican. I tend to agree with that consensus. I just wanted to leave it as a toss-up so I could talk about it more. I think the state of Iowa will be a safe Republican state, whether it is Grassley or whether it is some other Republican. We're talking about an off-year election with heightened Republican turnout. So I think the state of Iowa is definitely going to be safe red. I don't think there's really any scenario in 2020 where this seat actually flips in favor of Democrats, just because the state of Iowa has consistently shown all of us that it continues to trend more Republican. In 2020. It barely trended to the left. Donald Trump won the state very decisively. So I think overall, Iowa is going to stay a red state for the foreseeable future. So I think we're just going to leave that at safe red. The state of Wisconsin is really interesting because we have incumbent Senator Ron Johnson, who I don't think has announced whether he is running for re-election. So a lot of the senators, as you're going to see, haven't actually announced yet that they're running. But if Ron Johnson does run for the Senate again for a 3rd term, I think that he probably will have the edge, given that it is an off-year election. I would say that any Republican has the edge here in Wisconsin, solely based on the fact that I don't see a formidable Democratic challenger yet. That's unlike the state of Pennsylvania, which we'll get to. But I'm just going to say for right now, this is going to be a tilt Republican seat. Again, this could end up being a lean seat, or it could end up being a tilt blue seat in a better scenario for Democrats. But we have to keep in mind that 2022 is going to be an off-year election. Democratic turnout will not be as high as it is during the presidential. I do think in the United States there is more of a political engagement in off-year elections and special elections than there has been previously, which I think overall is a good thing, having higher civic engagement. But this means that midterms are going to have less wild swings than what we're used to. And 2022 will really be the test of that, whether this year turns out to be a wild swing year like a 2010 or a 2014. A crazy year where we see a state like Oregon get one in the Senate or something like that. And I'm basing that off of the fact that in 2010 we saw Senator Mark Kirk, a Republican, actually win a seat in Illinois, which is a safe blue state. So unless we have a crazy year like that, I think that this is going to be more of a red puddle as opposed to a red wave or a red tsunami or whatever you want to call it. I think it's going to be a much more low-key Republican victory. Next, we move on to the state of Ohio. Not a whole lot to talk about with Ohio. Just like Wisconsin, it is a state that is Republican and is going to be Republican. Rob Portman, the incumbent senator, will not run for re-election. So that leaves an open Senate seat in the state of Ohio. However, I don't really think that there is any strong Democratic challenger as of right now. Of course, I don't really know all the Republicans running yet because it's so early in the season, which makes it a little bit difficult to gauge these kind of races. But I think this is probably going to be at least a Republican likely margin, if not a safe Republican margin when it's all said and done. Again, this is going to be an off-year election, so I would not be surprised if a Republican ran away with a 12, 13-point victory in the Senate here. Next, we're going to move up and kind of make our way down. We're going to move to the state of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire is a really interesting state because we have a Democratic incumbent who's only been in office for one term. Maggie Hassan is running for re-election. And this is another state like Nevada that has ratings all over the place, from likely Democratic to battlegrounds. So far, there's only one Republican challenger to the seat. I don't really know much about him. We're not really going to go into the candidates this much, more so just kind of gauging what we can expect in this race. So if we go back to the 2020 presidential election, New Hampshire went pretty comfortably to Joe Biden, went to him by around 7 points. So, again, this is a big contrast to the 2016 victory we saw for nominee Hillary Clinton in the state of New Hampshire. She only eked out a victory by around 0.3%. So I was wrong before, it was 0.3%. So a very different picture. Of course, if we look at the 2020 results in New Hampshire, they're going to be all over the place. Jean Shaheen, the incumbent senator, ended up winning by 15 points, over 15 points, a safe margin, at the same time that Biden won the state by 7. And, of course, we had Chris Sununu, the incumbent Republican governor, who's not really the kind of New England rhino type that we're used to seeing, like a Charlie Baker or a Phil Scott. He is, a Trump-supporting governor, and he ended up winning in the state of New Hampshire by 32 points, which makes me think that New Hampshire has a very bipartisan voting record, really, and does split ticket a lot. Also, the entire state government ended up going Republican. Maggie Hassan, on the other hand, she only won, we'll pull it up, she only won her election in 2016 by 0.1%. So a super narrow margin. She's not nearly as popular as her colleague in the Senate, Jean Shaheen, is. And I think that this race is going to be relatively close, very close, in fact. I think that it's very likely that we're going to see possibly a Republican flip. But again, that's all prefaced on whether Chris Sununu actually runs for the seat or not. If Chris Sununu runs for the seat, I would easily put this as likely or lean Republican. But right now, I think I'm going to give Maggie Hassan the benefit of the doubt and just give it to her by a tilt margin. Just for now, because again, Jean Shaheen won her election in 2014, which was a very big red wave year. New Hampshire tends to buck the trends nationally when it comes to certain races. Of course, in 2018, Chris Sununu won re-election pretty comfortably in a blue wave year. So it tends to buck trends quite a lot in the state of New Hampshire. Next, we're going to move to the state of Pennsylvania. This is really interesting because Pennsylvania has a very strong Democrat running for the seat, and so far, no strong Republicans running for the seat. So there are plenty of... There's just this guy, Everett Stern. I have no idea who he is. But of course, the most, I think, formidable challenger on the Republican side is Brian Fitzpatrick, who is the representative in Pennsylvania's 8th congressional district. He's very... first, rather. They changed it. He's a very bipartisan sort of Republican. He ends up winning in Bucks County. If we go to his House seat, actually. This is a district that actually favors, I think, Republicans only by +1. But, we could see in 2016, Fitzpatrick won by around 9 points. If we go to 2020, on the House side, Fitzpatrick won by even more than that. He won by 13 points. So Fitzpatrick has a lot of bipartisan appeal. He's in a suburban district around Philadelphia. And I think similar to Pat Toomey in 2016, in his Senate race, would easily do better in places like Bucks County, probably win it. Narrow down Chester County. If we look at Chester County now, Chester County is bright blue. Let's just pull that up. Chester County is one of those collar counties around Philadelphia, or right around Philadelphia rather, not really touching it, but went plus 17 for Biden. This is a pretty safe Democratic county, but somebody like Brian Fitzpatrick would definitely chip away at that margin, maybe by half, maybe only lose the county by around 8 or so. Could easily win a place like Dauphin County, Erie County, Northampton County, even Lehigh County, Monroe perhaps. But then, of course, on the Democratic side, we have Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Now, he is a progressive Democrat. He is, from what I gather, pretty popular. He's definitely the best Democrat that could be running for that seat. Of course, he has 2 primary opponents. So far, I don't really know anything about them, and they probably won't get very far. Conor Lamb, of course, might actually end up running as the establishment Democrat on the ticket. So if that's the case, this could be very dicey, because even a divided primary could make it harder for Fetterman. But again, we're still talking about an election which is an R-plus environment. But since we have such a strong Democratic challenger right now in Fetterman, has shown he can win statewide. In fact, he unseated the incumbent lieutenant governor in a 2018 Democratic primary, which really says a lot about his political prowess. I'm going to put this seat at tilt Democrat just for that reason. And I think ultimately it's going to be a seat that's a toss-up, and that rating is probably going to change depending on who the nominees are. So this obviously will be updated in a few months or so. Next, we have the state of North Carolina. Of course, this is a state that in 2020 went to President Trump by 1.3%, former President Trump by 1.3%, and went to Senator Thom Tillis by a little bit more than that. He won the seat by around 2 points, 48.7 to 46.9. So 1.8% for Thom Tillis. This is a state that is a tilt red state. I like to call it the Republican Nevada. It's basically a state that since 2008, Democrats have always put a lot of attention and money into, and ultimately could never flip back blue. Similar to Republicans, although in this prediction, of course, I had a different consensus on that. I think Republicans can make inroads in Nevada. I think North Carolina is probably going to be a lean Republican seat in 2022. We don't exactly have a nominee yet. Richard Burr has announced he's retiring, so he will not be running. And in fact, if he did run, I think that would definitely hurt Republicans, considering he's not very popular with them now, I imagine. Of course, the Republican primary already has a declared candidate, Mark Walker, who represented North Carolina's 6th district. And of course, Pat McCrory might end up coming back and running for the Senate seat. If he runs for the seat, it could be a little bit tricky for Republicans to hold on to it. Not impossible, though, because this will be an off year. But, Mark Walker already has a lot of endorsements. So it seems like right now he's set to be nominee. Of course, he's the only declared candidate, so what am I kidding? If we look at Richard Burr's last election real quick, back in 2016, he won his re-election to the Senate very comfortably. Oh, I'm pulling up the wrong thing again. Yeah, Richard Burr won his re-election by around 6 points or so. So that was way more than expected. In fact, Deborah Ross, in some cases, was actually leading in the polls. So this was a seat that went a lot redder than expected. Of course, Richard Burr isn't running anymore, but this goes to show you how red North Carolina can get. But I still think it's only really going to be a lean margin. Now, Georgia is going to be very interesting because we have Raphael Warnock running again. He just ran in the 2021 special election and unseated incumbent Senator Kelly Loeffler. If we look at the 2020 results out of Georgia, Georgia flipped blue by around 0.2%. So not a lot, but it's still flipped. And of course, that is thanks to the Atlanta metro area. Now, the interesting thing is, I actually predicted that Warnock was going to win and Ossoff was going to lose. That was actually a popular consensus. And I was wrong. Both Democrats ended up winning. I did say that was a possibility, but at the time of making my video, I thought it was going to be more of a split verdict, but a very close one at that. But it didn't turn out to be that close. I don't know if this page is going to have the runoff results. No, it won't. But if we look at how David Perdue did the first round, he probably would have won had it not gone to a runoff. In fact, he would have. I'm not even saying that. But the state did go to a runoff, and the special election did garner national attention, and thus David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler were both knocked off. Georgia has 2 Democratic senators for the first time in a few decades. So that's very significant right off the bat already. If we look at the 2021 Georgia runoff results, David Perdue ended up losing to Jon Ossoff by 1.4%. So that's around nearly a 3.5 point swing in the opposite direction since the general. And that can be thanks in large part to the Atlanta metro area staying consistently Democratic. Now, the thing is, in this off-year election, and why it's hard to predict, Warnock won by 2. That's very impressive. I think you could see a scenario where Stacey Abrams decides to run for governor in the state of Georgia, which would energize many black voters to turn out, not just for her, but also for Raphael Warnock as well. Georgia is one of those states that I think is more likely to stay blue than the state of Arizona, demographically speaking. Demographics in Arizona are a lot different. There isn't really a large black vote in Arizona. There's more of a, Hispanic and Latino vote in the state of Arizona. Whereas in Georgia, most of the Democrats there are African Americans, so that changes things a lot, considering they're a much more loyal constituency to the Democratic Party. With that being said, for right now, not knowing Warnock's challenger, I'm going to put the result in Georgia as tilt blue. I think him running for re-election again, being who he is in the state of Georgia, will energize enough voters. Also, Georgia is one of those states that doesn't really swing too wildly in midterms. In 2014, David Perdue only won his Senate race by around 6 or 7 points. I think it was 7 points. And that was a typical margin. In 2012, the margin for Romney was around 8. So this is a state that doesn't really tend to swing so wildly in midterm elections. So I think this state is actually going to stay Democratic. I'm more confident about that prediction than I am with Arizona, barring Warnock, sponsoring some legislation that's very unpopular in his home state. I think he'll do well enough to end up eking it out in 2022, but it will probably be somewhat close. Florida, we didn't really have to talk much about. Marco Rubio will win the state of Florida pretty comfortably. If we go to the presidential result out of Florida, Florida went red by around 3 points this time around, which is much more than it did last time, only 1.2. Rubio is a much more, centrist-y Republican. At least he kind of gives off that vibe in the state. He's able to win big in urban areas like Duval County, Jacksonville winning by 16. And he's able to do well in Cuban areas like Miami-Dade County and Palm Beach County, areas where Trump did very well. This seat is going to probably be likely, if not safe, Rubio. Just for the benefit of the doubt, we're going to put it as likely Republican, just to the benefit of the doubt of the Democrats. But I don't really see Democrats getting a formidable challenger in the state of Florida. I probably could have put it as safe, but for right now I'm going to put it as likely. But this is my consensus on the race right now. Again, this is not by any means my final prediction on the race, because if I was, somebody who was to bet on the race, I might change maybe 1 or 2 states. Maybe I'd flip New Hampshire red or Pennsylvania red or, something like that, or flip Nevada blue. But this is just my consensus on how the races lean right now as of February 2021. Not a final prediction by any means. But anyway, thank you guys for watching this video. Please leave a like under this video if you enjoyed. Please subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.